there are some pretty crazy things coming out of Utah that are alarming to me and scared me to death. I've made a few posts in my Instagram stories. I didn't give enough context to really talk about like what's going on and why 70% adult mortality numbers are just unbelievable. So I'm going to dive into that. I have a few notes somewhere here that I made yesterday. Okay. So let's talk about what just happened. I literally just heard that Utah just tied the snow water equivalent record from set back in 1984. That's incredible. That's an incredible statistic. And looking at the graphs, they're probably going to far exceed that. That spring in 1984, if you're not from around here, you have no idea, don't remember. Spring of 1984 was record breaking. Salt Lake City had flooding in like downtown Salt Lake City. There was flooding across the state. Utah lost 50% of its deer in the spring of 1984. It was the biggest deer loss ever recorded was that year. There are some units, so like Cache County or the Cache unit, which would be up on the Idaho-Utah border or the Idaho-Wyoming border. Kind of encompasses the Cache Valley, Rich County, so Bear Lake areas, all that stuff. That place usually sees the highest winter mortality in the state of Utah for a number of reasons. A couple of reasons being it's super high in elevation. There are valley floors in that unit that the lowest the deer can literally winter range is 6,000 feet in elevation. Pretty high. So it usually takes it the worst. Well, if there's one shining light about all of this year and what's going on, that unit has been crushed. However, for whatever reason, and I'll go into it, what my opinion is, the deer are doing actually better than expected. Better than probably, and it's still early. Like we still have 3 to 4 more weeks, but right now they're sitting better than a lot of these other units that should be doing better. And I want to talk about why and what's going on, at least in my opinion. So the Cache, back in 1984, lost 70% of its deer. These metrics are hard to find. So if anybody can prove me wrong on this, I would love to see documentation data. I'm going off, so to say the 50% loss in 1984 and the 70% loss on the Cache unit in 1984, the spring of 1984, I'm using Dennis Austin's book. He was a biologist for the state of Utah and put a bunch of cool information in a book. So that's one metric I'm using. I'm looking at some data as far as buck harvest numbers from like before that and then after, and the worst I can ever see. So I'm going to give you an example. So 1982 in the Cache unit, there is a canyon called Blacksmith Fork Canyon. Hardware Ranch would be above it. There's been a buck station there, or there was a buck station there for a number of years. In 1982, that buck station, so this is Utah Rifle Opener, Blacksmith Fork Canyon. This is one of the chick station, just in one place. But it's cool information. 1982, 258 bucks checked in. 1983, 237 bucks checked in. That's when the winter happened. Fall of 1983, spring of 1984, or the winter of 1983-84. Spring of 1984 happens, crushes 70% reduction in deer. Okay, let's look at 1984. 16 bucks were checked in at that check station. So 240 roughly year before, down to 16. 1985, the following year, 31 bucks. That trend continued. It built slightly. Then 92, 93 came. That was also another, there's actually a number of them. 91, there's a number of bad winters, early 90s. However, that was the worst on record that I can find in Utah at 70% mortality. If you talk to the old timers, that lived, hunted on the cache, actually anywhere in the state of Utah. This has affected the whole entire state. They will talk about 1984 being the beginning of the end for mule deer. That basically that was the worst ever on record. It literally set in motion that winter a whole bunch of policy changes, all sorts of stuff. It was so significant. Utah Division of Wildlife literally, like it got the ball rolling on a lot of super big changes that we still see today in the division. There was a big carrying capacity issue. So basically carrying capacity, when I say that is, and I know a lot of you know this, but it's basically how many animals the land can support. It was way over objective and way more than what the land could support. So basically when that horrible winter came, you had this crushing 70% die off. That is like unimaginable to me. I can't even imagine seeing it. It caused a lot of people to just bag up and quit hunting. Pretty amazing stuff. So let's fast forward to recent times. So recent times, one of the most horrible winters on record was the 2016-17 winter. So the spring of 2017, that same unit, the cache that lost 70% back in 84, spring of 17, it lost 30%, roughly 30%. I think it was like 32% of its, 32% of its deer. Adult, and I'm talking adult deer. Now we have better metrics to measure adult versus fawn loss. So when I'm talking, fawn loss is going to happen, guys. Like that's going to happen on these rough winters. But when it's really alarming is when adult mortality is super high. So in 17, 30% die off. That matched almost identical to the Wyoming range. It was right there at 30% die off too. So if you hunted in like Region G, Region H, all that country, even up into southeast Idaho, and you experience that fawn loss or the deer loss, you experience 100% fawn loss in all those units. And then you also experience a 30%, at least 30% adult mortality. So if you hunted that and you realize like in 2014, 15, how good, even the fall of 2016, and then fast forward after 17, if you experience that, you know what I'm talking about. And we're talking 30% loss. Horrible stuff. So today, so the fall of 2022, we are still seeing results all throughout this region, western Wyoming, southeast Idaho, northern Utah, from that 16-17 winter when we lost 30% of adults. It's bad stuff. So let's talk about something way worse that's coming out of Utah, and we're talking 70% adult mortality. This should not be happening, in my opinion, in today's day and age. We are way better than this. Biology, this should not be happening. But let me tell you what's going on. This is my opinion. There's going to be more data that comes out about this, but it's very alarming. I think hunters need to be made aware, no matter where you live, something to take to look at. So in Utah, there's this set of units called the Wasatch Back. Like I would refer to them as the Wasatch Back unit. So basically you have units like Chalk Creek, Morgan South, Rich. Basically it's the stuff to just make this easy. From Evanston, Wyoming. So if you were to drive down the freeway towards Utah from Evanston, Wyoming, you're going to hit the Wyoming border. You're going to come down through. It's the stuff on both sides of the road, all through there, down towards Park City, even down into like the Heber Valley, some of those units that are down through there. These units, a couple of them in particular, they have less than 30% public land on them. So basically what I'm saying there is it's very much privately held. These are private, it's big private ranches. It's the strongest private land holding in the state of Utah is in these units. Places like Deseret Land and Livestock, Ensign Ranches, there's multiple big, they're just big ranches privately held there that basically are doing whatever they want. As far as the division's been cautioning them about an overabundance of elk in these units. They've been over objective for years. In fact, if you were to jump into the Utah elk plan, there were specific things wrote in that plan about places they cannot manage because basically they can't send hunters in on private property to manage these elk and to bring their numbers back to where they should be. So what's going on is you have this conglomeration of units with way too many elk on the landscape, and they've been holding back deer numbers. When these deer and elk come into fall, their fat is unbelievably lower than all this other surrounding units. Even units like the cache that theoretically and as far as data goes, should winter worse or should enter into winter worse. They're actually doing better there than they are in these units. This is all private land. And why is that happening? Well, I don't know. There could be a number of reasons, but number one, when you have elk way over objective, there is direct correlation between elk outcompeting mule deer. It's not even up for debate. It happens. So these units are experiencing right now record-breaking, I would argue record-breaking adult mortality, because back in the day when they talked about a 70% loss on the cache unit as being record-breaking, that was taking in all deer. We are losing 70% of our adult female deer, like prime age deer, are what produces the next generation of deer. It's insane. I have seen some pictures, video. I would like to see if I'll try to put some of them in here. I mean, pickup trucks full of dead deer, deer laying everywhere. We'll talk about elk for a second. Elk should not starve to death. It does happen occasionally. There is one unit, a cooperative wildlife management unit right now in Utah. Yes, actually, I'll say that. A cooperative wildlife management in Utah that's managing bull elk damn near to a 1-to-1 ratio. So a bull to cow ratio at almost 1-to-1. It's unheard of. There is no rancher on God's green earth that's worth his salt that would have his cattle operation have one bull to every cow he has. It's a total waste of resources. Why are we managing like this? Why are these ranchers doing it? Well, because there's money to be made in hunting, and they want to see this abundance of elk and all these bulls out there. They're charging a bunch of money. They're making a ton of money off this. However, this is going to affect the hunting there for years to come. It's going to affect that entire region. Hard stuff to swallow for me. And I'm getting angry about it just thinking about it. And so I'm trying to keep this. I don't want to bring in a bunch of opinions and start blowing different ranches and things that I've personally experienced. But this is bad stuff. Let's talk about so bulls are literally dying. There's elk dying all over. There's bulls literally dying off the side of the road, off the side of the freeway. I've had pictures sent to me from multiple people of this going on. They're just literally starving to death. They're laying in a ball, starved to death. Skin and bones, horrible stuff. Animals starving at rates that we should never allow in today's day and age. It's horrible stuff. So there is one, it's a wildlife management area owned by the state of Utah. These are pretty small. These aren't like giant tracts of land or anything. There is dozens of bull elk laying on this wildlife management area, dead. And we're talking 300-inch bulls. A lot of them, it's such a waste of resources. How many hunters would have taken these animals home, been happy for the meat they provided? I could go on and on about this. I'm just super upset. It's crazy to see. One thing where I'm going with this, the Utah Division of Wildlife, in my opinion, has done everything they can to stop this. They have talked about this for years. They have been on record in multiple times, like I talked about in the elk plan. You could go back multiple times. They have talked about these units being over objective. They literally cannot do anything but offer late season cow elk hunts when they come down onto some of these smaller private property parcels and these what public land there is. That brings me to this point. If you remember, and if you've been paying attention, when Utah implemented the shed antler season, there was a whole bunch of cry asses on there basically saying So Utah's offering, they were pissed that Utah was offering these cow elk hunts on some of these units late in the season. And they were bitching about these cow elk hunts late in the season. The reason we were doing that, Utah was doing that, was to stop this exact thing, this mass die-off from happening, trying to reduce the load on the land. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. A lot of you will know exactly who I'm talking about. And it's just complete bullshit. These guys sit and make these comments. They have no idea what the hell they're talking about. Utah the division has done everything. I don't know what more they can do on these places. It's troubling to see. This is basically ignoring science, and this is what happens when these large ranches and these large private property, they just ignore it and think they know more than the division. This is why there's carrying capacity issues. This is why Utah's managing. There's so much that goes into this. It's why there's cow elk hunts. It's just hard for me to sit back and watch people ridicule and just spread this disinformation on shit they have no idea what they're talking about. And because of them doing that and this misinformation and mismanagement, we're going to see maybe one of the largest ungulate die-offs we've seen in a lot of people's lifetimes. This is pretty incredible stuff. It's over 30 years. I mean, this is going to be record-breaking stuff. It's not good to see. It's just troubling. And where I'm going to with this is even in places like the Cache, Southeast Idaho, I see these hunters come to these meetings screaming, yelling at the division that there's not enough elk on the landscape. Like, these hunters want a landscape it's not even realistic. They want an endless amount of elk. They want an endless amount of deer, and to hell with the consequences. Well, this is the consequences. 70% adult mortality is the consequences of like this stupidity. Hard for me to sit back and watch. And mark my words, next year, the following year, the year after that, probably for the next 10 years, 15 years at least, we're going to see people bitch about the mismanagement in these same units by the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, and they had nothing to do with it. Their hands are tied. This is to be blamed on these private ranches, all these people that have refused to step up to the plate and listen to the division. That's what's going on here. It's troubling to see. I'll try to do a podcast when all the hard numbers are out about this stuff, but it's alarming stuff, guys. I mean, this is record breaking in my opinion. I mean, it's been 30 years since we've seen mortality like this. It's not good. It's going to be very interesting to how it shakes out. And the worst part is it's not even over yet. Let's pray for a warm up and hopefully things will be better. Watching this, you probably watched part 1 and part 2 of this weird ungulate die-off I'm referring to in Utah. If not, you should probably watch those. But I wanted to explain and show a few pictures that I'm getting from like on the ground stuff, some things I'm seeing. And then I also wanted to just on a map show, so I'm just going to do that very crudely. So here we have a map of Utah. The Cache unit that I was talking about that historically has always had the worst winter kill. That's for a couple reasons. It's super high elevation. So Logan here, Bear Lake here. These have typically been like, so this Cache unit encompasses this area, has typically always had the worst winter kill ever in Utah. It's always taken it the worst. There's some valley floors like in the Bear Lake, South Rich County. We're talking valley floors of higher than 6,000 feet. So the winter range is literally at 6,000 feet. The units that are getting crushed. So to repeat, this is it's single digit adult mortality right now. Now we're still in this, but that's what this unit is seeing. Down here, in like Morgan South Rich, which basically butts up to these units, some of these other units, 70% adult deer mortality. That's adult female deer mortality. So single digits, 70%. And my question is, what's going on? Why is there a difference, such a crazy difference between a unit that should winter technically on paper, should be worse up here? Down here, there's a lot of winter range hidden in here. This is all private property. There's a lot of canyons, nooks. There should be good winter range here, but evidently that's what I'm talking about. So it's that close. Now I'll show you some pictures that are kind of happening on the ground. Hopefully that makes sense. This is insane stuff. This is crazy to me, and it's hard. And I think people are having a hard time understanding. Like, a lot of people are chalking it up. Oh, there's a bad winter kill. No, it's way worse than that. There is average, or well, slightly above average winter kill in one unit, and horrific winter kill just south of it. And I'm asking why. So again, that cache unit, mostly public land. We can manage elk numbers, everything there. Down south in those Wasatch back units, like less than 30% public land. So hopefully that makes sense. Here, I'll show you some pictures and stuff that I've been seeing. So guys, elk shouldn't look like this. This is just crazy stuff. Look at this elk's back. You can see his hip bones poking out. It's just insane. Deer laying everywhere, literally by the piles. And one thing I want to point out in these pictures coming up, look how much bare ground there is and how much exposed vegetation, well, there should be. That is another factor that's like got me all like, what's going on? The cache buried in snow. Here these elk deer are, they're in like partially, it's insane. This should not be happening. This is just further demonstrates something is wrong in these units, whatever it is. I don't know, but I hope, I think I got a pretty good idea.